Thank you all for joining us here at I-80 Sports, where today we are back to regular season play, but we just came back from the Four Nations tournament, and we have a lot to discuss from that with the fallout from the Four Nations Faceoff. Guys, thank you all for joining us here at I-80 Sports. Thank you all for joining us here at I-80 Sports. Make sure that you subscribe down below, youtube.com/NHL on I-80 Sports, and hit up the comment section down below. What did you guys think of the Four Nations face-off? Do you think the NHL should run this again at some point? I think we're going to get a lot of answers from that between Tom and I today. So comment down below, hit the like button if you like our content as well. And away we go. I'm Brian. He's Tom. How you doing today, Tom?
I'm doing well. I guess I'm still a little down in the dumps about the result on Thursday night, but I will say this. I was up there in Boston for the two games. Had a great time. Unfortunate that I'm 0-3 when in attendance for USA hockey games now, but at the same time, our game had nothing. Our game had nothing to play for. Our team had nothing to play for. It didn't mean anything. But the other game was a lot of fun to be at. Boston, great city. Been there numerous times. There's still a lot of it I haven't had to see. And if you're ever up there, may I suggest, if you're hungry, to get something called a North Shore three-way. It's a roast beef sandwich, kind of similar to Arby's, but about 90,000 times better. It's a roast beef with American cheese, mayo, and spicy barbecue sauce on an onion roll. It really is a Boston thing. I know you think seafood when you're up there, but in reality, if you've ever been in New England, the best seafood you're going to get is not in Boston. You got to go to some little town on Cape Cod or the shoreline of Connecticut or Maine or even Rhode Island. You're not going to get – the seafood's going to be good in Boston, but it's not going to be the best. So, but the North Shore roast beef is a Boston thing, and I ate like 3 of them in one day up there. That's how good they were. There's a place just under TD Garden called Hub Hall, and if you don't like that, they have other stuff you can get too. It was a great time. Boston's a great city. If you've never, ever been there, I suggest you go. You will not have a bad time.
Dude, you've got me craving like New England clam chowder right now, and specifically I'll shamelessly plug this place if you're ever on Cape Cod. Fried oysters from Land Ho in Orleans, Massachusetts. If you ever get the chance to go there, lovely.
Yeah. I wanted fried clams in the worst way, but I'm going, it's the middle of winter. How good are they going to be? You figure roast beef is going to be good all year round. Rare roast beef, you can't go wrong. I don't think there's like a season for beef. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't think cows necessarily have like cow is in season right now. Oh man, I hate when my cow's out of season. Anyway, moving on to what we're here to really talk about. We're not talking about whether the cows are in season or not, but I can tell you what is in season, and that is hockey right now. And I think the Four Nations Faceoff was a pretty big success here for the NHL, but we'll dive into this. Let's talk results first. Let's talk results from each game. So the tournament kicked off on February 12th between Canada and Sweden, and we got off to a hot start with an OT finish between Canada and Sweden. Canada won that game against Sweden 4-3 in overtime. Then it was the United States' chance to finally showcase their skills against Team Finland. And let's say United States got off to a hot start, winning 6-1 against Team Finland the next day. Then we get to our Saturday games on February 15th. We get Finland versus Sweden in that first game, and it did not disappoint at all. It was a great game. Overtime finish for Team Finland, coming out on top 4-3 in overtime. And then we rang the bell for a boxing match between the United States and Canada. We got off to a hot and heavy start with 3 fights in just 9 seconds in that game. Both Kachuk brothers, now that I will affectionately dub them the Bash brothers for sure. United States winning that game 3-1 against Canada in the Bell Center. So that was a very fun game, probably one of the best games of the entire tournament as well. Then we get to 2 days later on that Monday, which Tom got the chance to go to with those 2 games. You got Canada face Team Finland. They won 5-3. and you had Sweden face United States in a meaningless game, and Sweden finally got the victory there 2-1, but it to no avail because Team Finland and Team Sweden were eliminated after Saturday. So there were more so consolation games. Then this past Thursday night on February 20th, it was the finals at TD Garden, Team Canada versus Team USA, and it was, in my opinion, a very good game. First of all, setting a hockey record for ESPN in terms of viewership, 9.3 million people watching in the United States on ESPN. Peaked at around 10 million also that night as well. But Team Canada winning in overtime. Connor McDavid scoring the game winner in overtime, and we'll get to that one in just a second. Trust me on that one. But Team Canada winning 3-2 in overtime against the United States, winning the Four Nations Faceoff. Yeah, Tom, I'm gonna start with you here because there's a lot to kind of talk about with this tournament. But what were your overall thoughts of the tournament? What were your thoughts from like the format in general? Do you think the NHL needs to consider bringing this back down the line?
I mean, listen, it was a replacement for the World Cup. At some point, they are going to have to just, buck up and realize, hey, listen, sometimes certain countries need to pull players from pull players that aren't in the NHL, need to pull players from other leagues. It's just the way it is. Obviously, USA and Canada, your top two, this is what people are tuning into. You're going to get all NHL players. Sweden, generally, you're going to get all NHL players. Finland, 95%, sure, you're going to get 95% of those guys are going to be NHL players. But at the same time, you do need to have some more teams. I think that this went off great, and there was a reason for it. It was just logistically the way they needed to plan it. This is the only way they could do it in order to get it off in this amount of time. It needed to be 4 teams. It needed to be in 2 major markets that were close enough to each other in Montreal and Boston, which is great. Now, I've said, why didn't they go to Toronto? Why didn't they go to Chicago? It's quite simple. The travel's too much. Toronto and Chicago, too much travel. Toronto and Detroit, too much travel. Toronto and Buffalo, close enough, yes. Not a knock to our friends over at Frozen 4 Podcast. But at the same time, Buffalo is not Boston. Buffalo, they love their hockey. They love their Sabres. They bleed for their Sabres. Their Sabres have not done well recently, but you need to have it in 2 big media markets and 2 big hockey markets, and that's what you got with Montreal and Boston. So I love that they did it. I don't know if we may ever see this again. I do think it'll go back to the old World Cup format. There will never, ever be a Team Europe. There will never, ever be a North American U23. What you'll probably wind up seeing is the Czechs back in this. You'll probably wind up seeing the Slovaks back in this. I'm not going to talk about Russia because I'm just not going to do it. That's a whole other thing that I'm not going to unpack right now. Yeah. And then at some point, you have to figure out who else you're going to put in. Will it be Switzerland? Will it be Germany? Depends. But, I mean, in the future, yeah. And it was funny because somebody brought up, why aren't there a bunch of other countries in it? Well, if you bring like a Germany or Slovenia or whatever in it, and you put them up against Canada, the results aren't going to be that great. But at the same time, it's something that they are going to have to consider expanding in the future. But I will say this. It was great. It was great. A lot of people said it's going to be a glorified all-star game. It's not going to be good. It's just the guys are going to be giving no effort. Who cares? What does it matter? It's not the Olympics. You watch that. You watch that. You had people who never, ever pay any attention to hockey tuning into this tournament. Yeah. And if there's one thing, if there's one entity, one league, one organization, whatever you want to name it. I was discussing this with a friend of mine. We were sitting there having dinner in an Irish pub in South Boston last Sunday night. We're discussing it, and I'm going, you know who really got hurt with this? The NBA. And our NBA friends there, the NBA got hurt because their gimmicky all-star game, which the NHL tried to copy off, which I never quite understood why, with their slam dunk competition and everything and this glitz and glamour and this big show, people were turning away. People I know who don't watch hockey were turning away from the NBA to watch this, to watch serious games. It wasn't an all-star game. People in other sports want to say this. It wasn't an all-star game. It's a tournament. It's an international tournament. But the problem with that is a lot of Americans who like the 3-man American sports, football, which is only really played here, baseball, which the World Baseball Classic has tried to, tried to make it a little more watchable, and basketball, which it's either if the U.S. wins, everybody tunes in, and if the U.S. doesn't win, nobody watches at all. this was competition. This was a tournament. This was akin to like a Euro. This was akin to maybe like a European Championship or a World Cup in soccer. It's international competition. And I'm very, very happy that other people who pay attention to other sports tuned into this, because this was great. And this is going to grow the game. And this is hopefully going to be the start of international, how do I put it? Consistent international competition. You know, they left the Olympics for the past two Olympics. Obviously, I wasn't happy with them not going in 2022, but COVID regulations were that. They were a bunch of greedy, you-know-whats in 2018 not going to Korea because they were worried about the money. And let's just say that 2016 World Cup was a joke. And the 2014 Olympics, when you got to the knockout games, the semifinals and the finals, was less than stellar. So I think they sabotaged. I've always said it. I think they purposely sabotaged the 2016 World Cup to make it terrible so they wouldn't have to do international competition again. And then before that, they did the World Cup whenever they felt like it. They went to a couple of Olympics, which were every 4 years. And then before that, you had the Canada Cup. But the Canada Cup was weird too. It was, whenever anybody can agree to do it, they did it. This is what we need. We need it streamlined, almost like in soccer, where you have a World Cup and then you have the World Cup every 4 years, and then those intervening even years, you have a European Championship. This is what we need. And I think this went off great, and I hope that this is a bright future going forward. I really, really think this went off perfectly.
Yeah, I mean, what more could you really ask for in the NHL's case? I'll piggyback on your thought with the NBA, because we started to see it with the NHL in terms of their All-Star game. No knock on All-Star competition. Like, it's fun to see, NHL, NBA, MLB, NFL, all of those guys have fun and play loosely and, showcase their skills. But the problem is you have less and less guys that are saying, you know what? I'm not going to go to the All-Star game. I don't want to risk getting hurt. I want to focus on the regular season. I want to focus on what lies ahead for my team. I don't want to, do the home run derby because I don't want to jack my swing. I don't want to do the skills competition in the, for the NHL because I'm worried I might, pull something. I don't want to do the dunk contest in the for the NBA because, well, it's always the same three guys anyway. And I think that's where the All-Star game has really kind of faltered over the last number of years. You have less and less people that find incentive to go and do this anymore. And it's sad because I feel like that's a failing on those professional markets of not incentivizing it more for the players, making it some kind of pay bump and some kind of bonus for them to go, incentivizing, the game itself. There was a time for the MLB where the team that won the All-Star game got home field advantage, for better or for worse. But you had more people that really showed up and show out for those games. So that way it was like, hey, let's go and play. Obviously, it didn't matter for a team like the Pittsburgh Pirates who had no horse in the race. Of just like, who do I care if I win home field advantage for a team that that's not us. But, for the NBA, they really kind of get hurt from the Four Nations face-off, just from how well it came off for the NHL, because it really kind of put them under a microscope of just like, well, why can't we do this? Why can't we as NBA players have some kind of format like this where we play for our nation or play for something, play for a coastline or something like that, and for the NHL, this was a major win, more so because you had more eyes on the product. And this is kind of what I was talking about a few years ago, because Tom, I'll even, mention for you, you were really skeptical of ESPN kind of taking the reins with the NHL in terms of streaming rights, in terms of broadcast rights. And this is kind of where I was just like, you know what? This is, I think, a really good thing for the NHL because you get more eyes on it because more people have ESPN today than they did 10, 15, 20 years ago. And the Four Nations face-off is really where it paid off for them here, and where I think this is kind of the launch pad of the good old days that are coming up for the NHL coming up. Because next year you've got the Olympics, which everybody's going to tune in and watch. In 2028, you have the World Cup of Hockey that's coming back. Sure, you might run another All-Star game in 2027, but you got to think the NHL at least has something in the back of their head of like, this was really successful. What can we do to build off of this in an off year where there's no Olympics, there's no World Cup of Hockey? Is there something similar to this that we can do? And I think that's now in their heads, and I think it's a good problem to have. Overall, I thought the presentation of the tournament was good. I liked that games had chance to breathe overall. And, You had one game on Thursday night. You had one game on Friday night. You had two games on Saturday where more people were home. You had two games on the holiday on Monday where more people were going to be home because of President's Day. And having the championship game on a Thursday night, I thought was really, really good as well. You get it closer to the weekend where people can maybe take the day off on a Friday or not have to worry about going in so early on a Friday. You had a lot more viewership at that point. And I thought overall, the NHL knocked it out of the park completely. I think you were missing maybe a few players, which we'll get into in just a little bit, of one particular player that was missing from the tournament for one particular team. But let's dive into players in general, because I think that's a good segue. We're going to talk about players that had a great tournament, that had a really good showcase, and other players that disappointed us on the flip side of things. Tom, in general, who do you think played well and who disappointed you?
Well, I mean, let's address the elephant in the room right now, I guess, if you really want to say it. And excuse me as I scroll down and look at the stats here.
Yeah.
I mean, your two obvious ones here are the two crown jewels of Team Canada, Connor McDavid and Nathan MacKinnon. MacKinnon had 4 goals, 0 assists, 4 points in 4 games. Connor McDavid, 3 goals, 2 assists, 5 points in 4 games. Sidney Crosby played hurt, 1 goal, 4 assists, 5 points in 4 games. Hats off to Zach Werenski, Team USA defenseman, who's having a hell of a year. Led the tournament in scoring without actually scoring a goal.
Yeah.
6 points in 4 games. All those guys were great. I mean, it was really the U.S. and Canadian players. Sweden and Finland, just nobody there really had a great tournament.
One player I would say. I think Jesper Bratt had a pretty good tournament for Sweden.
I'd say so, yeah. And then let's address another elephant in the room right now. The Tkachuk brothers. Tkachuk brothers. Matthew Tkachuk, 2 goals, 1 assist, 3 points in 4 games. And let's address the biggest elephant in the room and the biggest, who's going to be one of the biggest topics going down the line. Captain of the Ottawa Senators, number 7, Brady Tkachuk. 3 goals, no assists, 3 points. Goes into that championship game with the flu, scores a goal. If Jordan Binnington didn't go in a beast mode, and it still sickens me to watch this, would have had that winner in OT with the flu. Would have had it. So a lot of the things were about Brady Tkachuk when trade rumors were rumbling earlier in the year, because Ottawa is not really getting their stuff together. They were, then they're not, then they were, then they're not. There were these talks around Brady Tkachuk saying basically, this guy's never played in the playoffs. How do you know if you send him to a contender? How do you know how he's really going to be? How do you know how good he's going to be? Well, this tournament just answered all of those questions.
Yeah.
He was edgy. He was throwing hits. He was scoring goals. He was forechecking. He was putting his body on the line for what everybody thought was going to be a glorified All-Star game. Well, nobody told him that. Yeah. And that's echoing what his old man Keith did in the 96 World Cup. And we'll even bring it further to a tournament that ESPN decided to almost destroy in 04, the 04 World Cup. I'll never forget that quarterfinal against Russia where his old man scored 4 goals in a game. Well, he was echoing his old man in this tournament, Brady Tkachuk. Honestly, right now, if I were an Ottawa Senators fan, I would really be worried, because his trade value is through the roof right now. And if the Sens don't get it together, we talked about this in past episodes, he may just decide, I want to go somewhere else. I obviously have shown what I can do in big games, because every game in this tournament was really a playoff game. Maybe not the first games, but once you got past the first round of this tournament, they call it the first round in international competition. Once you got past those first round robin games, every game was a tight playoff game. And hats off to that Sweden-Finland game on a Saturday afternoon. That was a great game.
Yeah.
But yeah, now he's showing that he could go to a team that's a contender and really, really dominate and show and score goals and can contribute. And Andy Strickland has already had rumors going around that he wants to go to Florida. I hope not. Hey, Chris, I hope Chris Drury still has his eye on him and gives Ottawa some great package to get him to New York, because I think him and JT Miller together would be scary.
Regardless. It's funny. I was telling a guy at the bar on Thursday, because the guy sitting to the left of me was a diehard Rangers fan. He's just like, man, Brady Tkachuk's going to look great in a Rangers uniform in about a year. I was just like, dude, you've got Brady Tkachuk at home. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, you have JT Miller. That's Brady Kachuk at home.
Oh, always better to have two, right? Always
Yeah,
better to
but
have two.
imagine how much of a menace it would be if you had Brady and Matt on the same team in a regular season and in the playoffs. That's like a cheat code.
It would be, and I'm not denying that. I just hope it doesn't
Oh,
happen.
I completely agree. I like the mentality overall of Team USA in this tournament. I thought some other players that you didn't mention here that played really well. I was very impressed by Jacob Slavin. Sure, his numbers rarely translate to the stat sheet, to the score sheet in general, but he is an unsung hero of Team USA just by nature and of his defensive ability. He's one of the best defensive players in hockey, one of the best defensemen in hockey. And he might be one of the reasons why the NHL needs to consider a award for defensive defensemen. You know, guys that are unsung heroes on their teams that rarely make it on the stat sheet, but make big differences in the game. I was very impressed by Jacob Slavin's game in general. Connor Hellebuck also was the best goaltender in the tournament by far. He had a 932 save percentage, a 1.59 goals against average. He is probably going to be a repeat Vezina winner this year as well. And hats off to Jordan Bennington for an amazing tournament as well. I really didn't think that he was the correct answer in net for Canada when John Cooper announced that they were going with Jordan Bennington last Thursday night against Sweden. I was kind of thinking like, all right, Canada's already thrown in the towel. Aiden Hill should be the guy starting in net, not Jordan Bennington. But you know what? Jordan Bennington played that finals against Team USA like he won the Stanley Cup in 2019 with the St. Louis Blues. Like
On
that
that
was
same ice.
on that same ice as well. He must have been getting Vietnam flashbacks as well because he was standing on his head on that Thursday night championship game. He had a 907 save percentage, a 2.37 goals against. He had a fantastic tournament as well. Another player that jumps off to my mind of players that I'll segue this into disappointment and I'll lead with like who disappointed me in this tournament. A lot of people are quick to point out, like, oh, Jack Hughes was a disappointment in this tournament. We really thought that this was going to be his coming out party. Yeah, I was a little bit disappointed that he didn't find the score sheet more often, but it was very comforting to see that he was the guy ripping the most shots. He had 12 shots in this tournament. And yeah, he couldn't find the back of the net, but he was creating chances and opportunities for Team USA left and right. And even times where he was getting bulldogged and knocked down by tougher competition. Hats off to Jack Hughes in terms of growth over the last 2 years. I think if this was Jack Hughes 2 years ago, he would have really struggled against this competition, would have a slow time getting up, and I think would have been playing scared. He gets hit, he gets right back up and gets right back into the play, and he is going to be a major asset for the New Jersey Devils kind of going forward down the stretch for their regular season. A player that really thoroughly disappointed me, and Tom, I know I'm going to be probably starting this kind of conversation with you because I think you're reading my mind in terms of who was disappointing to me. Austin Matthews. I mean, okay, I'm going to go a little off the cuff on this one. And this is not Toronto hate. This is not Austin Matthews hate. I don't think he was the right choice for captain for Team USA. And it's not because he plays for Toronto. It's not because he's Austin Matthews. It's not even because of the mustache. This is a guy who has not proven himself in the playoffs and has proven time in and time out that when the chips are down, he does not show up. He just phones it in. And the most unforgivable mistake in my mind that he committed in that championship game was in overtime where he forgot to cover Connor McDavid. That is his man in the slot. And Austin Matthews got caught skating around. It wasn't Adam Fox's to jump on. Adam Fox was playing the boards and trying to battle along the boards. Wasn't Jack Hughes' guy. He came down to try to support Adam Fox. It wasn't whoever the left-handed defenseman was in front of the net. They had their guy covered in front of Hellebuck. You got to know when a guy like Connor McDavid is on the ice. You got to know where he is at all times. I don't know what Austin Matthews was doing, trying to be third man in on that play, but you left the slot wide open for his game winner and basically served it on a silver platter to Connor McDavid. But he's done this time in and time out, and it's never his fault. It's always, it was team effort, this and that. No, it's never his fault. In my mind, he should not have been captain. It should have been either Matt Tkachuk or Brady Tkachuk, both guys who I think would have been worthy guys to wear the C. If Quinn Hughes had played the tournament, I think he would have been certifiably a better choice at captain. But to me, that was just an ugly disappointment in my mind. And really the only disappointment that I could really find that I wanted to kind of point out in this tournament overall. Tom, what do you think?
I agree with you 100%. I've never been an Austin Matthews hater. He's American. He scores a lot of goals. He's won a Rocket Richard trophy. Plays in the biggest hockey market in the world. Let's just put it that way, in the world. But it's not just on him. Obviously, he let his man go. But there were other moments in that game, too. Brady Tkachuk let McKinnon go on the first goal. They had a defensive breakdown on the tying goal. But it goes beyond that. It goes beyond that. You're a 60-goal scorer on average, and I'm just making these numbers up right now, so don't quote me on this. But you're a 50 to 60-goal guy every year. You're one of the best in the world. So here you are playing against the best in the world, and in 4 games you have 3 assists. 3 assists in 4 games. You didn't put one puck past any goalie in any of these games. I love the Tkachuk brothers. I love Matt Tkachuk. I love Brady Tkachuk. You need guys like that to win a championship. But answer me this. Outside of maybe winning a Conn Smythe, which I'm sure one of them will do at some point, are they ever going to win a Ross? Are they ever going to win a Hart? I don't really know. Are they ever going to win a Rocket? I don't really know.
Maybe Matt Tkachuk could. I could see him in some scenario, maybe winning one of those trophies, because like playing for such a potent team like Florida, I think it's possible. And he's a guy that can net like anywhere from 100 to 130 points in a season for sure. It's just going to be more so based on what the rest of the league is doing around him.
No, and I get that too. But it goes beyond Austin Matthews. It does.
Yeah.
It goes beyond him. Jack Eichel. Not one goal. Jack Eichel has been there. Jack Eichel has won the Stanley Cup. Jack Eichel, a couple of years ago, we would be in the same breath as Austin Matthews. He later disproved that going to Vegas and winning himself a Stanley Cup after never playing in one playoff game in his life. Jack Eichel, 4 assists. Not one puck past any other goalie in this tournament. Not one.
I mean, he was still like somewhat impressive in my mind. He was very noticeable on the ice. It was unfortunate that he couldn't. It was kind of like Jack Hughes in that sense. Just couldn't find the back of the net despite the amount of shots and chances that he generated. But Jack Eichel still, I wouldn't say it was a bad tournament that Eichel had.
I'm not saying it's a bad tournament. I'm saying they needed more. Now, I'll quote one of my favorite bands, this band named Queensryche. You may have heard of them. There's a song that they have called Empire, and they say there's a line in the song, by way of comparison, Canada's top 2 centers, Connor McDavid and Nathan McKinnon. McDavid, 3 pucks in the back of the net in 4 games. McKinnon, 4 pucks in the back of the net in 4 games after having a hard performance against the U.S. Hard performance. The fact is that you needed them two to show up. You needed them two to do more, and they didn't do it. And I'm not faulting them. Jack Hughes, you said what you had to say about him. I'm not going to say any more. Kyle Connor, having a hell of a year in Winnipeg, on fire. Invisible. Yeah.
And it was especially apparent when he was scratched in the championship game in favor of Chris Kreider, who had a disappointing championship game. He had a disappointing championship game, but he had a really great game against Finland. Or not Finland, Sweden, rather.
Sweden, yeah, but the game didn't mean anything. That was his audition. Yeah. That was his audition. Here's another guy who plays in our local area. Brock Nelson. What in the hell was he doing on this team? 4 games played, 0s across the boards, -3. When you got a guy, Brock Besser, sitting home, I'm sure chomping at the bit to get on this team. Where was he? Where was Brock Nelson? What purpose did he serve playing for this team? Every time he was out there, I was literally having a freaking heart attack because he was out of position every time he was out there. Every time.
To be fair on Brock Nelson's part, and this is not me trying to play devil's advocate, you had a lot of centers on this team, and that was very thoroughly apparent by the fact that the guys that weren't playing at center almost felt like they didn't know what to do defensively at times. Like Brock Nelson wasn't covering his point a lot of the time, mostly because he kept going down low to try to cover his normal spot at center. But the problem is you can't, and this is part of the problem in general when you have like 3 centers on one line. You need consistency and you need a game plan, and you also need to have a little bit of time to work and practice with these lines a little bit, and more so just practice defensively and practice breakouts, practice playing a neutral zone and trying to play your role, at left wing, at right wing. And Brock Nelson half the time looked lost, and I feel like he's on this team as almost like an audition for the trade deadline because he's a major trade deadline piece coming up. I actually see him possibly going to maybe somewhere like Colorado as a potential piece down the middle for them because they're going to be looking for some center depth. Could be under the radar piece maybe for New Jersey Devils, who's looking for an upgrade at center as well. But yeah, I agree. I don't know what Brock Nelson's purpose was in this tournament. And honestly, if Kyle Connor didn't have such a disappointing tournament, I think I would have scratched Brock Nelson in favor of Chris Kreider instead of Kyle Connor.
Well, speaking of people named Brock, I can guarantee you this Brock Besser is probably on the Olympic team next year in favor of one of those guys. So, but regardless, it all comes around. It all comes around to this, and it's not a knock on Austin Matthews, and it's not a knock on Jack Eichel, even though you guys might think it's a knock. It goes back further with the culture of USA hockey. You have your great national team development program, which has been great. You have your World Junior domination lately, which is, but let's just call it that. We have been dominating that tournament a lot lately, and it's great. But it comes further. World Juniors is a U20 tournament where you have a select group of guys to pick from. National team development program, same thing. You're limited by age. When it comes to these bests on bests, or even when it not comes to these bests on bests, it's are guys willing to play? Are guys willing to play? And I was reading something the other day, and it's funny you bring it up. It's funny it gets brought up. Brian Burke even said it. Yeah. All these other countries, when the Worlds come up, a couple of years ago, Lundqvist got called to Sweden for the Worlds, no problem. Crosby gets called to Canada for the Worlds, no problem. Ovechkin, we'll bring Russia into this even as much as I don't want to, gets called to play for Russia in the Worlds, no problem. A lot of guys in the U.S., they get, no, I want to go on vacation. No, I want to spend time with my family. No, I don't want to play. And granted, I think the World Championship is a BS tournament. But the fact is that you're an American and you're a hockey player, and you have best on best coming up, and it helps. Even if not everybody's there, you have a select few guys there to build chemistry, to see what you can do for these upcoming tournaments. And that's what Canada has, and that's what Finland has, and that's what Sweden has. And that's not what we have.
Yeah.
In addition to this, we'll go back even further because it's not a knock on these guys. It's not a knock on, I mean, it is a knock, but it's not a knock. But let's go back. Let's not just completely place the blame on them. Let's go back to 2014. Who was our best player at those Sochi Olympics? Who was supposed to be our guy at those Sochi Olympics back in 2014? Supposed to be Patrick Kane. He was supposed to be the best player on that team. He had just won the cup with the Blackhawks. He had just won a Conn Smythe Trophy. He didn't show up in those Olympics at all. 4 assists in 6 games, not 1 goal. Again, and here we go. The trend goes again. Not 1 goal in those Olympics. Not 1 goal in those Olympics. Now, we can all talk about TJ Oshie, and we can all talk about that Russia shootout, but that game against Canada was the game we needed. Canada went up 1-0. Jonathan Quick stood on his head that game. Where was your offense? Where was Patrick Kane? Where was that clutch goal? Wasn't there. It wasn't there. He was lost those entire Olympics. He didn't do anything. So I just want to, I'm going to keep it brief, but let's go further back. Let's go back to that 96 World Cup team. Let's look at those stats. In 7 games played, Brett Hull, I know it's questionable if he's American or not, but he's American because his mom's American. His dad was a Canadian. His mom was an American. He can choose to do whatever he wants, kind of just like Thomas Harley did. Born and raised in Syracuse, but playing for Canada. Brett Hull in that 1996 World Cup, 7 goals, 4 assists, 11 points in 7 games. Let's go further down that roster. John LeClair, 6 goals, 4 assists, 10 points in 7 games. Doug Waite, 3 goals, 4 assists, 7 points in 7 games. Brian Leach had 0. Keith Tkachuk, the old man, 5 goals, 1 assist, 6 points in 7 games. Hell, Darian Hatcher had 5 points in 6 games, and this was a guy who was a stay-at-home freaking defenseman. So let's go to 02. Let's go to 02. We should have won that, but we didn't because Joe Sakic was the best hockey player in the world at the time, and he showed it in the gold medal game. But let's go look at that team in 02, that Olympic team. Brett Hull, 3 goals, 5 assists, 8 points in 6 games. John LeClair, 6 goals, 1 assist, 7 points in 6 games. Mike Modano, 0 goals, but 6 points, point per game guy. Point per game guy. And this is what separates, I hate to say it, the men from the boys. Those late 90s, that core of Brian Leach, Chris Chelios, Mike Richter, Tony Amonte, Doug Waite, Keith Tkachuk, Jeremy Roenick. Keep naming them. I'll forget them. I don't know. This is what makes that Bill Guerin, who is the GM of this team, this is what makes that generation better than this one. And until this generation comes out there and the best players prove who they are, and it's not a knock on the Tkachuks because they played great, but until everybody, because our depth was great, our goaltending was great. Hellebuck maybe should have had one of those in the championship game, but our goaltending's always been great. Whether it's been Hellebuck or Jonathan Quick or Ryan Miller or Mike Richter, our goaltending's always been great. Our core back on D, always been great. But until our top forwards start getting the job done, we're going nowhere. So this is a wake-up call to Jack Eichel and Austin Matthews. It's time to start doing something. It's time to start scoring goals. It's time to start taking this by the reins and doing something. This is a wake-up call to Quinn Hughes. Chris Chelios played when they asked him to play. Brian Leach played when they asked him to play. I don't care how hurt you are. You see Sidney Crosby out there playing on a bad elbow, can't even shoot. Can't even shoot. His elbow is compromised, and I'm sitting there at Boston Garden last Monday afternoon. He throws a hit in the neutral zone, elbow first, and pots an empty netter while he's hurt. Hi, Quinn. It's time for you to wake up. It's time for you. Are you serious about playing for Team USA, or are you not? Because if you're not, stay the F home next year. Stay home. We don't need you. So it's time for everybody outside of the Tkachuks and Dylan Larkin and Jake Getzel and Connor Hellebuck and all of them. And I tip my cap to them because they played great. But it's time for Quinn Hughes and Jack Eichel and Austin Matthews. It's time to wake up. It's time to wake up and realize, what are you really doing? Are you serious about this or are you not? Because that country to the north of us right now, and I love Canada, their 2 best players were serious about it, and they got the job done that you couldn't get done. Quite simple.
Yeah. Now, if that's not a speech that has you ready to run your head through a wall, I don't know what is. But man, I'm fired up now. I'm going to go run my head through a wall. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, no, you're right, though. You hit the nail on the head. I think this is a wake-up call for Team USA overall, and even the championship game was as well. And I was telling a buddy of mine this too the other day. I'm okay with losing this tournament if it means that we win the gold medal next year. And I'm hoping that Team USA comes back really ready for next year. I hope that this was more so just a Olympic tune-up and they're ready to really hit the ground running next year at the Olympics. And, bring Quinn Hughes back on. Maybe Luke Hughes is ready to make the jump to Olympic play next year as well. He'll have another year of development under his belt, and he's having a much better year this year than he did last year. And maybe we have all 3 Hughes boys. Maybe we have both Tkachuks and make it a whole big family party next year at the Olympics. But it's left to be seen. We're going to round out this episode with our question of the day. And question of the day, we already kind of brought it up before, but I'll make it official here. Tom, I'll say this as simply as I possibly can. With the Olympics coming up in next year in 2026 and the World Cup of Hockey officially returning in 2028, should the NHL consider running some form of the Four Nations Faceoff again, or should they revert back to an All-Star weekend as a little bit of a throwback since it'll be about 2 years since the last All-Star game?
Well, I agree. It needs to be every 2 years. You got to have your international competition. They're going to have to at some point. They have to come to an agreement. It's always been a problem, going way back to the days of the Iron Curtain teams fighting the NHL and Canadian teams about how things should be run. It's gotten a little bit better. So you're going to have every 2 years. You're going to have your World Cup and you're going to have your Olympics. I don't like the All-Star game. I never have. But here's something that a guy who dearly to your heart, who I don't like, but I'm sure you do, Greg Wyshynski with ESPN. I really don't like him, to be honest with you. Not a fan of his. But maybe, just maybe, we could do like you probably know the Summit Series back in 1972. It was 8 games between Canada and the Soviets. It was like a 8-game exhibition series.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we can't do that. We know we can't do that. But maybe, just maybe, we do like a 6 or an 8 team thing where you have like, okay, us in Canada, and you do a best of 3 series during the week. And then say you have Sweden and Finland. They do the same thing, like a best of 3 series during the week. Every other day you play a game. And maybe, just maybe, you do like the Czechs and the Slovaks, a best of 3 series. Something like that. Why not? He suggested it. You can't do 8. You can't do 8 games. It's obvious. But maybe just do a best of 3.
I'm fine if we don't have an all-star game again. I'm totally fine with that. That being said, there's still a little soft spot in my heart for the skills competition. And I still think that there's some place for the skills competition overall. And what I'd like to see is the NHL maybe adopt an international system on those off years, on those odd years, essentially, where there's no international play. You could still have like some kind of international, okay, who are the best in the NHL right now internationally, and form like and even do like what you did in 2016 with North America 23 and under, North America 23 and over, Europe, and doing it that way where you still have your skills competition, and then you do like that little round robin, like, okay, Team Canada faces Team USA in a best of 3. Finland versus Sweden, best of 3. Slovakia versus Czech Republic in a best of 3. Doing something like that, I think, would still be a nice way of kind of honoring what the Four Nations tournament gave this year as a way of like getting back into international competition. But yeah, guys, as per usual, what do you guys think? Do you agree? Do you disagree with our takes? Let us know down below. And while you're there commenting on what you guys saw at the Four Nations tournament, drop a like and make sure you subscribe down below, youtube.com/NHL on I-80 Sports. And make sure you hit the bell notifications so that way you guys know when our content goes live. And we've got the rest of the regular season to look up to here. We're definitely going to be taking on some trade deadline rumors and thoughts coming up over these next few weeks as we barrel through towards the end of the regular season. And we're going to have plenty of content coming towards you guys. But until then, let's watch some NHL hockey. I'm going to watch some NHL hockey myself. The New Jersey Devils are playing the Nashville Predators tonight, so I'm going to get myself glued to that. But until then,
watch them myself. The Rangers just won.
There you go. Very nice. I'm Brian. He's been Tom. This has been our reaction to the Four Nations Face-Off here at I-80 Sports.